Welcome to the Danger Zone, the Terrible Infant Movies and TV podcast. I'm Will. We have Mike again.
Hey.
And Jim is here.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about TV worlds, and kind of more specifically the way in which a lot of TV shows, I was going to say all, but obviously there are exceptions to the rule. A lot of TV shows are kind of sold on what the world is, and it's almost like the TV version of kind of like the high concept premise for movies, and how detailed the world is, and how intricate it is, and kind of how the characters play into it, and how the storylines come out of it. So, is that an accurate enough description of what we're going to talk about?
Definitely.
So the first one that Jim brought up, which is probably the one that a lot of people want to hear us talk about, that I think you guys have a lot to say about, is Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're much more familiar with Game of Thrones than I am, both of you, if you want to start.
Mike? I'll start if you want.
Yeah, go ahead, start us off.
So, full disclosure, I've never read any of the books.
Me neither.
A bunch of people have, but also a bunch of people haven't. You can still enjoy the show and be really into it, and the characters and everything else, without ever having looked at a book.
To me, it's like, you know, I get the people who read the books and then like the show, but it's like, I don't like knowing what's happening. So like, spoiler or whatever, there's gonna be spoilers in this if you haven't watched Game of Thrones or are waiting for
Any
it to
of
be
these
done,
shows
whatever. So the Red Wedding, everyone was like, you know, people were expecting it to happen because they read about it. It was a surprise to me because I had no idea it was gonna happen, and so like for me, since I haven't read the books, there's no point for me to read ahead just to spoil the show for me, right? And so, like, yeah, there's, like, backstory and stuff I'm missing, but it's like, you know, I can still enjoy the show.
I'm in the same boat. Cause, like, I didn't, when Game of Thrones first came out, it was, like, 2010, I think, right? That was season 1?
It's going into, it's what,
season
7th or 8th, right?
But they've skipped some years.
Yeah,
right?
so
well, they're skipping a year now because of global warming.
Around 2010, yeah.
Right, so 2010, my wife and I had just moved into our first apartment because we were about to get married. And so we had our own cable package, right? And we had HBO.
Yeah.
And so we're just like, you know, I had always been a fan of Entourage and like other programming on HBO. That's just like they have some really legit shows, you know, it goes back in their history. And just seeing some of the marketing material for Game of Thrones, like, okay, that looks cool. You know, like I like war shit, you know, and they market it as like this medieval like battles against each other with some fantasy shit mixed in, which is fine with me, you know, whatever. And then you watch the first episode, you're like, holy shit, like the production value of like what they're doing here and like what they built and the costumes, performances, like props, everything. You're like, this is a fucking legit, this is a very excellently produced show. And in addition to that, like in the earlier seasons, there was a bunch of nudity and sex and just like betrayal and backstabbing and just like a bunch of weird shit. You're like, holy, like you get into it, like you're sucked into it, and then. Like earlier on back then, like that was before the dragons were born out or whatever, and like there wasn't as much fantasy stuff. Like there was just all like they live in this realm of, you know, Westeros, and like there's all these different houses and whatever, blah blah blah.
Similar to like an England type.
Right, exactly. Like that's,
I mean, to the point that where even like the people from the north have northern English accents, and the people from the main city have London accents and stuff. Like,
so it's like you just get sucked into it so much, and because of how well this show is produced and written, and just how it like how the seasons sort of feed into like this massive scale of what that world becomes over time. You know, we're talking like almost a decade ago now. Like the reason it's so popular, I think, is because it's so like fantastically done in a way that no other TV show up to that point had done it. Yeah. You know, this is before, so like 2010. I don't even know, like, Hulu had to have been around back then, but they weren't producing their own shit. That was just like a licensing thing.
Yeah, I think
Netflix was the same stuff. Their first original show was House of Cards was 2013. So, like, all this stuff now that we're seeing on, like, these Amazon originals, Netflix originals, Hulu, across the board, none of that shit existed before. Yeah. Right? And so this HBO diving, like, headfirst into the deep end of, like, we're going to dump a shitload of resources into creating this, like, mythical medieval world that it has so much going on that you can't not be into it if you're a normal person. Will hates the show, but he's, you know, a little kooky.
Well, it's like a lot of, and like you say, a lot of like companies like Netflix and Amazon, they always talk about they want their
own Game of Thrones,
right?
Yeah.
And you know, Amazon's still looking for their own Game of Thrones.
Well, that's why they bought the Lord of the Rings rights, right?
That, and also The Expanse, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, they'll fuck it up. Don't worry.
I think with Game of Thrones, what they do really, really well that a lot of shows don't is they have a really big ensemble cast.
Yeah.
and the way they split up the storylines is done really well. Most of the episodes you get little snippets from each storyline. Some episodes feature like one heavily if there's like a big battle or a big moment. And there's a lot of shows with big ensemble cast where they struggle with finding the right balance, and Game of Thrones does that really well, which goes back to your statement that it's well written and it's well produced. They have a plan in mind. Another show like Walking Dead, I think, really struggles with not having that.
Yeah.
They have such a big cast that you'll see a main character and then you won't see them for 4 episodes, and you just can't do that. Like, you stop caring about those people when you see them so infrequently.
And do you think that so I will say, and I don't, it is true that I don't like Game of Thrones, but it's not because of the world. I think the world is really well done, and I think that the way that they've set up Game of Thrones is really good because all of those characters come out of that world, and they feel organic to that world, and then because of that, all the storylines that they become involved in, it's like the foundation of everything. Yeah. It all grows out of that, and it's done really, really well. And I would wonder I've only seen maybe like half a season of Walking Dead, and this might just be a symptom of it's just a post-apocalyptic normal world, right? It's our world.
It's our world.
But it's after the apocalypse.
It's all in Georgia.
So do you think that maybe what happened with Walking Dead is they were like, well, we know the world because we live in this world where it's just after the apocalypse. Like, it's not as intimately detailed as...
No, I mean, we'll get to Walking Dead in a little bit, because there's a lot... It's way more... Like, what I want to discuss about that is way more intricate than just, we're in a suburb of fucking Atlanta, so no one gives a shit anymore. But going back to Game of Thrones, like... You brought up a really good point, Mike, where you're like, they do an excellent job of giving you just enough of a glimpse into what a character's going on with them, whatever. Because there's an interesting stat, and I think this is still true. I've heard this like, maybe it's around season 6 or 7 of Game of Thrones, but there's no single character that's been in every single episode of Game of Thrones. So every single one, like, the Peter Dinklage character, Lena Headey, or whatever. Headey, sorry. Lena Headey, like, the Khaleesi chick. What's her actress name?
Emilia Clarke.
Emilia Clarke, thank you.
I met her in person. She's very
Kit Harington, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's no... They give you just enough that you want more. It's like a really well-written book, you know? Like, you turn the page, chapter ends, and the next chapter is like another storyline. You're like, fuck, I want to know what happened. Like, what's going to be the cliffhanger?
Skip that chapter.
Right. So you're sucked into it in such a way that, like... like, conversationally, you're talking about this fucking medieval dragon bullshit, like magic spells, like the House of White and Black, all this stuff about a world that will never exist and never has existed in fucking human history, but everybody, because of how well the show is done and how popular it is, like, everybody seems to be, conversational in that.
I think what the writers realized, and I'm going to tie this into wrestling because I'm a big wrestling fan, is if you have, say you have Peter Dinklage's character, and you feature him every single episode.
WWE Raw.
Right. And all you do is feature him, no one's going to give a fuck about him. The reason it works with wrestlers, the reason you cheer for a specific character is because of the bad guy who they're partnered with, right? For a good guy, you need a bad guy, right? And so the characters in Game of Thrones play off each other, and I think the writers and producers realized early on that you can't have just one person dominate the show because no one's going to care about the other characters or about them eventually. Because if you see, like I said, Peter Dinklage over and over and over, and there's no stakes and there's no involvement with anyone else, it's not as fun. But because he's tied with all these other characters, and all these other characters are important, and they all interact with each other, you build this world where you have a lot of important characters. So like you said, this episode we won't really see too much Peter Dinklage, but it's okay. We see Daenerys and what she's doing, or it's okay. We go to the north to the wall. We see all that, and it's all interesting. And all these storylines are eventually going to tie in.
See, that's the thing. Like, they're all building towards this intersection, which is going to be in this, presumably in the upcoming final season, like season 8. I
assume so. Yeah.
Because it's
hopefully,
right. I'm like, what the fuck have we been wasting the last 10 years of our life for? But that's exactly because there's all this building in this world of, like, this epic, face-off of, like, the Targaryens and the Khaleesi's and, whatever. Like, all these different houses is just going to be this epic mash like what's going to happen, and we don't know because we don't read the fucking books, right?
Well, the show's ahead.
The book's not out, right?
There's like 4 people that know, and it's basically
George R. R. Martin
in
that last one.
It didn't come across very well.
It's George Martin, the writer,
and the 2
R. Martin,
right?
Yeah.
But what I like is, I mean, they basically, and I think the first episode or 2 basically say what the show's all about. It's about who can be on the Iron Throne, and it's about winter's coming, and all the seasons have been building to that, and we're finally...
It's going to be the dragons and the ice people, right? Fighting?
We'll see.
Yeah, the White Walkers. I mean, like,
why else would
there's so much crazy shit.
Why else would you have ice zombies and dragons in the same show? They have to fight.
Much.
There's an ice dragon.
There is an ice dragon.
Yeah.
It got killed and it got brought back. Is
it badass?
Fuck yeah, it is. Dude, like, so they...
There's also an ice giant.
Isn't it the good guys? The good guys killed the dragon, but like it crashes next to like all the White Walker and like the Ice White Walker King.
No, the good guys didn't kill it.
Well, whatever. Like
Ice King killed it.
Okay, did he kill it? And then
he threw the spear at it.
That's right. So the Ice King, like this all happened in front of like the Jon Snow, like the Kit Harington.
Yeah.
You know, like he's like the beacon of like morality and whatever. And you see this dragon like get slayed in real time. That was Mike, by the way.
Yeah.
That was.
And then this dragon crash, and like they're separated by like some icy body of water. So like that's why they're not physically, battling each other. And then this, like, it's such a visceral scene. The evil villain Ice King just like puts his hand on the dragon's head, and he's staring at Jon Snow while the dragon is like coming back to like the undead life. Like he just transforms it in real time, and then he just hops on it, and it's like, oh fuck, like. Well, that's now all these White Walkers who are immortal to begin with have a fucking dragon.
Well, that's why that.
How do you kill them? Dragon glass?
Dragon glass and fire thing. But that's why it's interesting because anyone they fight, they bring back. Like the White Walkers is the army of the dead.
And they just keep getting bigger.
They keep getting bigger, so it's hard to fight them because no matter how good you are, there's going to be losses, and they just replenish themselves. And that's why some people think that the end of the show is just going to be the White Walkers win, right? And it's like a really down ending. I don't think it's going to be like that.
Well, but then my question would be, what's their goal?
The White Walkers?
Yeah. They're just a bunch of dead people. They just want to take over the world?
Conquer, yeah.
I imagine so.
There's a hierarchy for sure.
There's a ton of mentioning of them, but they've only really been prominently featured for like a season or 2. Right?
It's really the last season that like they're finally starting to like broach, their section of the real world.
It's like you get 5 years of dread and foreboding that they're coming and they finally arrive.
They showed. I'm thinking like seasons 1 through 6. You probably saw White Walker's screen time like less than 5 minutes in like 60 years of worth of television. But then this last season, it's like, okay, there's like an entire campaign of like...
Why did they decide to finally come in and start killing him?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. I just don't know. That's not the point. So I'm curious. Yeah.
We might find out. Who knows?
I mean, because like the show starts out, the White Walkers are like... There's just this, like he said, like this slowly amassing force.
Yeah, I've seen the first 3 seasons.
Right, so it's just like they're always on threat of broaching like the wall, which brings them from like the netherworld into the realm of reality for all like the humans that are like the Jon Snow and Khaleesi and all that other shit.
It's basically like a device that's used in films as a clock. It's a ticking clock, and it's finally gotten to the point where it's like the final act. They're finally here. They breached the wall that hasn't ever been breached, and now it's going to be all this crazy stuff. I read some crazy things like there's some of the episodes in this final season are like 90 minutes long.
I think they're all supposed to be feature length.
They're like feature length. Some of the battles that are some of just the battles in this final season cost more than like entire episodes previously. Well, so I think one battle took them 40 days to film. It's like insane.
No, it was the Battle of the Bastards, which was in season 7, which I should probably show you, Will, because that like is the most magnificent television you'll probably ever see. It took them 8 weeks to film like an action sequence in television. So I work in half-hour comedy, which is obviously different, like part of the business. But we shoot an episode in 5 days, right? Like clockwork. Every 5 days, like an episode the principal photography gets done. It took 8 weeks to film one sequence. That's how much like attention and detail and like resources and effort and energy go into like making sure this show is as good as it is.
They basically have the production values of a big budget movie, and it's done so well that I feel HBO doesn't mind the money and the time it takes, and they kind of like take a hands-off approach on it. And
no, just look at all the merchandise and shit going around. Stuff.
And it's nice because like
ATM.
It is like basically like they're filming a movie and they have that kind of freedom. And it's cool. It'd be nice if more shows could do that, and obviously you can't because this final season they're going to spend probably like $200 million on like 7 episodes or something like that. And it's just unheard of before in TV because that's basically the cost of a full-length Marvel film.
Yeah.
It takes like 3-4 years to do. But it's going to be obviously, 10, 11, 12 hours.
I mean, it's going to, like, I can imagine the final season of Game of Thrones is going to get, it's probably going to set the bar for, like, cable ratings, like, for pay TV.
I think 20 million plus each episode.
Yeah, I don't know, like, I would be surprised if, like, within 2 decades, if any show even came close to getting what the numbers are for what they're probably going to get.
Connors.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, should we segue into Walking Dead?
Let's do it.
Yeah, sure.
So, what Game of Thrones does really well with the ensemble cast, Walking Dead doesn't, and it did for a while for the first maybe half of the show, half run of the show, the first 4 seasons. And I think what happened is their budget isn't nearly as extensive as Game of Thrones. And what happened is they have all these characters that are more important, and they obviously want raises, and it's just impossible for them. So what they do is they probably offer those actors more money per episode, but feature them in fewer episodes so they can do other side projects or whatever. Although I read recently that their contracts now don't allow them to do outside projects outside of Walking Dead.
So why wouldn't you just quit at that point?
Well, a lot of main characters.
I don't know. Like that, I think that's getting way too much into like the supposed semantics of like their deals and shit. I think more like in the earlier seasons, I had a problem with Walking Dead. Like I really enjoyed season 1 because it was just so like there's no zombie apocalypse show. There just didn't exist, right? Mm-hmm. Came out right around the same time as Game of Thrones did.
Yeah, they were both about
The first season was only 6 episodes. Season 2 was maybe 10, I think, maybe
10 or 13,
right? The entire second season took place on the farm, right? It was
more or less, yeah. It was all in one spot, and some people hate that, but I'm like.
So it was Maggie's dad, the Herschel, who's the actor, unfortunately just passed away, I think, like this week, the actor that played that character. The whole season took place on the farm, and the whole first season was basically like in downtown Atlanta, like in that one office building. They were trying to figure out how the fuck do we get out of here, and then they like escape the city, and then they go to the CDC, whatever. And I stopped watching Walking Dead back then because I was like, this show's fucking boring. Like, I don't need 13 episodes of the same fucking show in the same location on the Herschel's farm. Like, they're not doing anything. The zombies aren't coming. They're not going out. They're not moving. Like, whatever. Season 3, it goes from like downtown Atlanta to a farm to the prison in season 3. And after that, I'm like, I'm over the show. Like, it's not interesting anymore, whatever. And then a couple of years had went by. And I think Netflix licensed the whole thing or whatever. I'm like, well, fuck it. And I literally just revisited the show out of nothing more than I didn't have anything else that I was interested in watching on a particular day. So I just started binging it again. And once you get past, like, I think part of the failure of that show early on was that they were too simple. Like, the cast wasn't big enough. They didn't have enough, like, cutaway storylines. Like, this is what's happening over here. This is what's happening over here. And they really, like, went way too far in the other direction. That like, so when you start to get seasons 4 and 5, when like the Carol and the King Ezekiel and like all this other shit, and you're like you're going to like King Ezekiel with this guy with a fucking tiger in post-apocalyptic Georgia, right?
Tiger.
Yeah,
he's
it's just like
keeper, and he has this tame tiger basically.
Right, and he talks in like such a regal way, like just his verbiage and like his line delivery is like such a weird, like, why is this fucking guy like this? Like, fuck this guy.
There's a scene where he explains why.
No, I get that. I'm just saying, like,
it's weird.
So they went from like one end of the spectrum to the other like so rapidly, and I think that was like, but they started to reel it back in whenever the Negan character, the Jeffrey Dean Morgan, came in. So now I think it's more they've reined it back in to where it's more like it's the right amount of storylines and characters that you can easily follow and stay interested in, especially with the last season, like season 6 through what they're doing right now, which is 9, I think is right in that wheelhouse that you're talking about. But before that, it's like it was 5 people in a fucking single house, and then they went to like, okay, now we're going to be all over the state of Georgia with all these fucking people you don't have any idea who they are or what their background is, and now like they sort of found the sweet spot.
So I think the second season, I don't mind them being on the farm, but 13 episodes is way too long for that. If the second season was 6 episodes like the first season, then there's enough story there and there's enough betrayal. And whatever. But it's 7 episodes too long. These last 2 seasons have basically killed the show, and I don't think it's going to survive another year or 2. I think it's going to get canceled. The ratings are just. They're the lowest they've ever been.
Yeah, but they're still very solid for cable TV.
For cable, but
like that's the thing that people are losing sight of. Yeah, they're not getting like 12 million plus viewers,
but I imagine that budget for that amount of cast is really high, and the numbers eventually won't justify it. But that's beside the point. These last 2 seasons, to me, though, because they literally have 20 or more main characters, basically recurring characters or starring characters.
It's not that much.
It is that much.
Not like, yeah, there's 20 characters that you recognize their face, but they're not like the core cast, like in the opening title credits, right? Because that's the core cast. Like,
there's at least a dozen that are in the core cast in the main.
Can you name them?
There's Rick, there's Michonne, there's
Rick and Michonne are like kind of the same thing.
Yeah, but that's 2 characters, right?
Yeah, but they're like...
There's like Rick, there's Michonne, there was Carl, there was Abraham, there was... what's her name?
Maggie.
There's Maggie, there's Glenn, there was...
Glenn's gone.
I know, these people are gone now, right? But there was all these people, and...
But, so, okay, so...
And I also said, there's like a 3-episode arc where you don't see Rick at all. And I'm like, this is you can't, like, it's hard to do that. And the thing that I think that's killed the show is the Negan character. He's really fun in the comics, but his personality doesn't translate to TV very well. He's so over the top. Like you said, King Ezekiel with the tiger and the way he talks. Negan's just like so over the top in this show that's trying to be gritty and serious. It's like, this is a comic book. And
yeah, but do you think that was a conscious choice by the filmmakers to introduce a character like that as a change of pace? Because what the fuck is Negan if not a change of pace for that entire world that we're talking about? Right? Yeah,
I agree. Season 5 was some of their highest ratings ever, and then
I think season 5 was probably like.
And then they did a change of pace and they killed all their ratings.
So can I ask who? Spoiler alert. Who did Negan kill in that cliffhanger thing?
He killed Glenn and Abraham.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who, Glenn wasn't too surprising. I think some people thought...
No, Glenn was a surprise because he was...
They thought one person and it was a surprise because it was 2 people.
Yeah, because Daryl, after he killed Abraham, and then, like, his bat was still dripping with the blood and the brains of Abraham, and he put it right in front of Abraham's girlfriend's face, like, hey, you guys dating? You know, like, the most sadistic, fucked up shit you can possibly imagine. And another character, Daryl, like, jumped up and punched him just as, like, fuck you for doing this to
one of our guys. Punch you some more.
And so as retribution for Negan, for one of these other people punching Negan in the face, he, like, instead of killing the one guy, he's like, all right, well, you guys are going to have to pay for that, and just turn...
He's basically trying to beat them into submission, and they wouldn't, so he beat another guy. What I hated with that whole thing was the cliffhanger was season 6 was them out in the field, and then they cliffhangered someone dying, and that was the season ending, and you have to wait till the whole next season to find out. And I hated that, and I hated that just because of the way the internet and TV works and that's why I mentioned the contracts. I knew Glenn was dying because Glenn signed a new contract with another show. And I hate that kind of stuff because, like, I didn't want to know who died, but I saw he signed a contract to be in another show or in a movie. I knew those actors weren't allowed to, so I knew he was dying. And that's why I brought that up. I hated that cliffhanger.
Yeah, but how much of the general public do you think is actually, like, tracking?
No, I'm sure there wasn't. I
mean, like, you're probably, unfortunately, you're probably in the minority with that, but I think, like, kind of...
I think a lot of people were turned off that those 2 characters were killed because they were kind of, like, fan favorites, I'd say. I didn't mind it because Negan's you're supposed to be scared of him because, like, the one problem with The Walking Dead, other than the governor, there's not really, like, someone that matches up with Rick. He kind of just, like, steamrolls everybody. Yeah. And Negan's supposed to be this, like...
Which he was. And he totally was. He was like, what happens when...
Is he not on anymore?
He's, like...
He's
a captive now.
Okay.
So
they finally beat him, but he's still, like... Are you watching season 9 currently? No,
I'm off the show.
It's not as clear cut as you might think. And the reason, like, so getting us.
Well, I read the comics, so I kind of know what happens.
Getting us back on track with what we're talking about, and like in how interesting the world is I like how it goes from this like lawless, like nomad, like every man for himself, just a bunch of scavengers trying to survive, to like these people finding like an existing community and sort of like incorporating themselves in like their survival instincts and tactics into that, and sort of, now there's these combating communities between Alexandria, Oceanside, the Sanctuary, and whatever the other the garbage dump thing is. Yeah. And all these communities are so inherently different, and not only like aesthetically, like the landscape is different, but the people and like how, the different hierarchies are all different, and like how those communities are now like, at one point in the show, like how they're combating each other, and now how they're sort of leaning on each other for support. And now with season 9, there's a bunch of weird shit. I think I'm one episode behind, so I'm basically like current, but there's a bunch of like, little teasers or Easter eggs, whatever the fuck you want to call them, that there's this entire like legit large scale infrastructure that still exists in the United States with like aircraft and stuff. And, like they just give you enough to be like, holy, what the fuck is this?
That'd be funny if they find out that like everyone outside of Georgia is fine, and they've just been like feuding for years.
So season 9 opens when they're scavenging downtown Washington D.C. Like they go to the Smithsonian to like get some shit to use in their whatever. So like, unfortunately, like it definitely is the entire world is fucked. But what like the point I'm getting at is like they're starting to introduce elements where it's not anything you've seen in that show before. Like you've never seen or heard a helicopter and airplane in The Walking Dead, right? Because that entire aspect of like human culture and infrastructure disappeared in the wake of the zombie apocalypse. But now they're bringing it back, and just like coincidentally, this is going to be Andrew Lincoln's last season, which is
I think he's only got like 1 or 2 shows left. I think he's leaving, not even mid-season finale. It's going to be soon.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's soon.
Well, I didn't know. I knew he was like leaving the show. I didn't think it was like.
It's not a season finale, and they said it's not even a mid-season finale, so it's soon. I don't know how he's leaving. Like if he's dying, if he's just leaving, kind of like how Morgan did. I have no idea. And I watched the show up until this last season, and when the whole season's done, I may go back and watch it. I was a huge fan for the first 5-6 seasons, and like I would watch it every Sunday, and now it just doesn't draw me in anymore.
Right.
And I mean, I do like the world. I do like a lot of the characters, but
I like it because it's like a society building itself from the ground up. Yeah. And it's like seeing them trip over themselves and like make all the mistakes that like you think like, why would you make that decision, or why would you guys do it this way? Like when humanity already went through the learning curve of like building a civilization, why can't everybody just fucking behave and cooperate? Because we're not supposed to be the enemies of each other. It's the fucking like the billions of zombies that are trying to eat our brains, right?
That's one thing. It's there's like like 1,000 people and you're fighting amongst themselves. There's like they're doing billions of zombies wanting to eat you, and it's like you're just gonna kill yourselves.
The things that the humans do to each other are like exponentially worse than what the zombies would do.
Isn't that the thing with Game of Thrones too? Is that the humans are worse than the monsters?
Well, yeah,
because the monsters they're almost like a force of nature. They're singular minded, and it's not like they're not enjoying it. They're not scheming. It's like they just do it. Versus like people who scheme and backstab and all this stuff.
Well, like all of our personal grievances with the seasons, the character choices, whatever aside, like the fact stands that like Game of Thrones and Walking Dead like created such a specific and unique universe for their characters to live in, and for like audiences to like know and appreciate and just have like such a sense of understanding and familiarity with that, like you don't even think that it's like that far outside the realm of possibility. Fun. Everyone thinks a zombie apocalypse could be real, and you want to think that like, I survive and I'd be this character in this world. You know what I mean?
And it's fun because they all have there's all these things you after you watch these shows for a while and you see these worlds. There's all these little rules you pick up, and it's really fun. Like in The Walking Dead, if you're bitten or blood gets mixed, that's what turns you. Yet they're like fighting and their faces are covered in blood, but there's no fear of ever turning.
Right.
You just accept that, and it's fun. And Game of Thrones has stuff like that too. But that's the kind of world they build, and that's sort of half the fun of it, I think.
So, an older show that I wonder if it influenced this whole kind of trend of worlds on TV and the stuff that we're talking about. Lost.
Oh yeah.
Because when I think back to
what world does that show exist in?
Well, that's what I'm saying though. But like the the shit that happens in Lost is so fucking weird, and the place that they are is so bizarre.
Yeah.
That became more interesting than
The island was more interesting.
right.
Than most
Exactly.
Of the
I
people.
was saying, but I'm wondering if did that in some way influence like a move towards focusing a lot on worlds in building shows. Or, well, you know, because there was also, you have the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I do
you have
remember
Harry Potter. Like, you
yeah.
do have other big worlds that exist.
I mean, I do
before.
remember when Lost, especially the first 3 seasons, like, it was like a big event. Like, every time an episode went, it was like a big deal.
Those
like,
first 3 seasons were like on
huge ratings,
Yeah.
and it was like, it was really talked about
probably
a
like
lot.
the best cliffhangers
And
ever.
so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's weird, but it's like, and they had a big ensemble cast too, but they did a really good job, at least for the first few seasons, of like showing just enough backstory to have you like care about some.
Well,
of
and
the
each character
characters.
gets episodes.
Yeah, each
right?
character
so, like,
gets-
that format works.
But it's
Yeah.
smart because they show the flashback, which focuses on usually like 1 or 2 characters. But then the stuff in what the present time is happening usually involves some of the other characters as well. So you never have like episodes where like you don't see Matthew Fox for like half a season, you know. So they do that really well, and it is such an interesting world. It's like it's small because it's just an island, but there's all these like secrets to discover. Right? What are there's these bunkers and there's all these other people that you see later.
The Dharma Initiative.
Yeah, there's like all this cool,
Yeah.
and
The
there's
polar bear?
all this cool stuff to find out the Black
The
Mist.
shipwreck.
Yeah, you like remember all of it. It's just a really interesting world where you almost like it, and it almost happens like in season 2 and in season 3. You just dump all these new characters in, and they're interesting because they're in this world that you set up, and you can literally dump anybody you want in that world, and it'll be fun.
Yeah, but see, then like the problem I have with Lost though is like I was just as hooked like a fucking degenerate drug addict like anyone else was on seasons 1 through 3. Like
Yeah.
that shit is impossible not to just be addicted to. But then, like, how did they follow it up? Like, what the fuck did that show? Like, how did it wrap itself up? It didn't. Like, it just
No.
It
Well-
went like they got off the island and went back to L.A. or whatever, and then
And then
like
they did the flash forwards instead of the flashbacks.
I remember watching that. I started Lost after it had already completed its entire run, and it was all like the entire show was on Netflix to stream. And I remember giving up on it like halfway through season 5 because I was thinking like I don't have any fucking idea. Not only what I'm watching or what these people are saying, like I don't know how this ties into anything that I've watched before.
I like
up to
season
this point.
4, I remember.
I think I
Is that
read-
when the
yeah.
boat shows up?
I couldn't like.
I think
I don't know.
I remember reading.
Did you see when the whole stuff with Daniel Faraday and there's that old woman and who's like the weird physics shit? Do you remember that whole plot?
I don't know,
It's
dude.
so weird. I love it.
It's been a while since
I love
watched
how
it.
weird it is. There's
But
there's like a physicist, and then there's like this old woman, and there's like this weird chamber that she's in. It's so weird. I love it.
I think I remember reading, and this is like a general, what most people believe is they had an idea for the first 3 seasons.
Yeah, and then they
they didn't realize how big of a hit it was going to be, and then they kind of got to that point, and they're like, "Fuck, we got to think of some new shit." And so they come up with all these ideas, and that's why you notice such a sharp decline in quality after the first 3 seasons. So it's like yeah, when you're thinking of a show and you're trying to come up with a show, if you're trying to pitch and get a show made, usually you try to think of 5 seasons worth. I imagine back when Lost came out, they thought of 3 seasons.
I imagine when Lost came out, they didn't have any fucking idea where that
Or
show was going to go.
Yeah, or
They were
that.
high out of their minds.
I think it was more like Damon Lindelof was just like, let's just
There's a polar bear,
Yeah,
some
just-
mist,
here-
throw them on an island.
Hurley.
here's a bunch of whacked out sci-fi cliffhangers, and we'll figure out the rest later. And they never did.
You know, they're making another show that's like a bunch of people go up in a plane and then
Manifest.
and then like 4 years later they're back like no
saw
time
that,
has
yeah.
passed, and I'm like, this is like Lost but just like without the island, and it looks horrible.
Well, spoiler alert, isn't it the end is that they all died or something
I don't know.
on the island?
Lost?
In Lost?
Yeah.
No.
I don't know.
I thought that was the end. That they
I
all,
think that was
they-
the implication, but like there was never any definitive
They all
closure.
die, but they don't all die on the island. They all meet. He died, like Matthew Fox dies on the island. They all die in different places, and they all like meet up.
Oh, I thought
in end.
the finale. And this has been a while since I saw it, but I remember that they all died in the plane crash, and the whole thing was just in their heads.
I think that's like one of the theories, but I think with the flash forwards, you kind of see what their lives were after the island. Mm-hmm. And I think the final ending where they're all in the church is like they all die in different times, and they go there, and they're all waiting for the last person to die to like.
Who's the last one to die?
Matthew Fox, because he
okay.
dies on the island. I think he's
he
the
goes
last one
back
to
the
appear.
island or something.
Yeah, he goes back. Some of them go back.
Fucking pussy.
Like John Locke, he goes back because obviously he can walk on the island, and back home he's in a wheelchair, and like I would too. So.
All right. Well, so that's Lost.
It's like we're back where we started.
Well,
we
We didn't know anything about Lost because we're so confused
But
by it.
I mean, to me, what the thing that makes Lost unique is the world, and
Definitely.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's definitely like whacked out of its mind with the universe that it lives in, and just
There's some fun characters. The one that sticks out to me is John Locke, but it's all about the world.
I liked Mr. Echo a lot, and then
I hated John Locke.
I like John Locke.
I
think he played his role well because I don't think you were really supposed to like him.
I liked the Scottish dude or whatever.
oh yeah, Desmond.
Yeah.
Desmond is
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, I
he's
liked
cool.
him too.
He's in the new show, The 100. Well,
Yeah,
new
he
show.
is,
It's like
yeah.
season 6 now.
So
It's not really new.
another
The
old
new
one.
syndicated show.
Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks, yeah.
I've never never even seen a frame of it.
I've seen the first season. That's it. But
So, it's like one of those shows that most people like. If you want to be a writer or work in TV, you should see it. And I'll confess, I didn't see it for a long time. I saw it for the first time all the way through last winter or like 2 years ago. Because I was home, back home in Indiana. I had nothing to do, and it's all on Netflix, so I watched it. It's very like the characters in the world are very kooky and like.
Yeah, well, it's very David Lynch, right?
it's
I mean,
very
it's like
David-
so.
If you
David
hate
Lynch.
him, you obviously hate the show.
But to me, it's unique because at that time there was nothing like that.
It's
on
so
TV.
It's very unique. It's very weird. The characters like. Sometimes they act like human beings, and sometimes it's like completely ridiculous.
What network was it on originally?
CBS. I think.
Yeah, it was on.
It was on network.
Like on broadcast?
Yeah, what? And it's so weird. Because it starts as normal.
Who bought that?
And then it just gets weirder and
It gets
weirder.
weirder, and there's like all these like
Dang.
split personalities, and there's
It was only one season, right?
No, there were two. Yeah, but the
Season
first one
one was
is like the
short.
one that everyone loves, and then the second
okay.
one is like
and the
But
big
the second one, you're not talking about the reboot recently, right?
no. There was a second season. Yeah,
Like back in the
Yeah.
day.
yeah.
Okay.
So season 1 was like I think 6 or 8 episodes.
8 episodes, I
and
think,
season
yeah.
2 was like a full 22. And obviously, what most people you don't know anything probably about it, but what most people hate is like this FBI agent came in to solve a murder of like who killed this girl, and they don't tell you who killed the girl at the end of the first season, and that kind of probably killed a lot of their ratings, and they didn't get renewed past season 2. You kind of find out like in the middle of season 2. It's kind of weird, and then kind of after you find out, the show tonally shifts a bit. And like a bunch, it's hard to describe because so much weird shit.
No, I mean, it's like watching a David Lynch movie.
There's like a
you
woman
can't
walking
describe
around
it.
with a log.
Yeah, there's a woman.
One guy
walking
gets
around with a
abducted
log.
by you think aliens.
She's
and he
walking around
doesn't
with a
know
what?
with a log.
That talks
She's like
to
the
her.
log lady, and they
Yeah,
like talk to each other.
one colonel is like monitoring alien signals, and he gets abducted or something. There's like this serial killer.
Is there a point to all the weirdness? Like, does it ever get...
You mean
like,
why is it all weird?
Yeah, or is
Well, I
it like
think
Lost,
it's
where it
'cause
just gets
it's-
weirder and weirder?
It's
and
David
then-
Lynch's
It gets
world.
it gets
so
weirder
it's weird.
and weirder. The initial crime
Sounds awesome.
is solved, and it's pretty much wrapped
So
up.
it's like a police procedural in Riyadh.
more or less.
That's a throwback to another podcast, by
But
the way.
I will say I haven't watched the new reboot. I watched like 3 episodes and I kind of stopped. I just wasn't feeling it. The original, just like the character, it's a really fun.
it
show
has
to
a very
watch.
unique mood too.
Yeah.
That I think it takes place in the Pacific Northwest, and it has this kind of like 80s like synthesizer music.
It's very
and, like,
weird. There's like weird music, and like I remember a scene where I forget the guy who owns the hotel, but I forget the character's name. And like he's sitting eating dinner with his family, and it's like a really normal scene. And his brother comes home, and he's kind of this like short weird guy, and he gives him like a sub and like a sandwich, and he's like, "This is from wherever he was at. And this is like the best sandwich I've ever had." And he like starts eating the sub like not like a normal way. He like turns it like sideways. It's
like eating a hot dog sideways, like a fucking psychopath.
And he's basically like orgasming in front of like his family, and he's eating the sandwich, and the scene is like 3 minutes long of him just like just eating it and like loving it. And I'm like, this is fucking weird. Like, and then after that scene, it goes back to like a completely normal conversation. I'm like, what is going on? So there's like a lot of stuff like that, but like
that's David Lynch, right?
It's fun, and you kind of.
But I think, you can't do a podcast about TV worlds and not mention think Twin Peaks just because of how unique it is. So one that Jim mentioned that is a show that I really love that I didn't think I would love because of the world is Sons of Anarchy.
Woo! It's one of the best ever.
I totally agree with you. And when someone told me you have to watch a show about these bikers, I was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And it's so fucking good.
Oh my god,
really good.
And they're just the rules of everything about that world is so well defined.
Yeah.
That you understand who all these people are, where they come from, what code they're adhering to. It's almost like cowboys.
It's so well defined without it being expositional ever.
No, there's never an explanation of what's going on. You just know.
You just get it.
And just the drama in that show and the way that the seasons are structured and the way the characters are arranged.
Yeah.
It's Hamlet, right?
Right.
And that's what
and
it's
it's
based
like
on, but
their own version of morality and like what the decisions they can and can't make based on like what they know to be right and wrong. You know, it's just so perfectly unique for what that world is supposed to be. You know, it's like Kurt Sutter, the creator. It's like you think that he was fucking Jax Teller, like, you know, a decade before he wrote the show. You think that's him. Like, that's how authentic it feels.
It's a world that I think a lot of people... Like, I mean, when you think of people typically who are TV junkies, who consume a lot of TV, who write about TV online, who talk about TV in podcasts or whatever, you don't think of like...
I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't think about the kind of people who like are into bikers.
Right.
And it's just... But to make a show that's that good about something you would traditionally expect people might not gravitate towards...
Right.
Is, I think, a very bold choice to make, and also indicative of how good that show is.
And I also love how it's definitely part of like the real world, right? Because like there's no fantasy elements or any bullshit like that. There's nothing unrealistic about that show whatsoever.
And you even know where it's located, even though it's not a real city.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I was getting at is I like how it's just barely on the fringe of like our daily life right now here in Los Angeles today, you know, like on this Thursday or whatever, like, you know that world exists somewhere close to proximity to us. Like,
I've seen, since I watched that show, when I drive down the highway in California,
right? You notice
I see the dudes with the cuts.
Yeah.
And it's like a real thing. And
right.
You can see the way that they drive. They're driving by, like, they know what they're doing. They're in a formation. Like, there's rules about what they're doing.
Yeah, I love how it's just like, it's a perfectly detailed glimpse into this world that, like, us three in this, like, talking this podcast right now, you know, and probably a bunch of people are going to be listening to it, are like, they're never going to dive into that world and like be a true part of it, you know. But it's like you feel like you know it based on the stories that are told like throughout the 7-season arc or whatever that show. And
like when you mentioned them driving in order, it just reminded me. I remember, I think it was early on, maybe season 2 or 3, whenever Jax is kind of feuding with Ron Perlman's character Clay, and they're all driving, and Jax kind of like drives by him to pass him to like be ahead of him, and like it seems like such a small thing, but it's such a big moment. It almost feels like in another show, like what a betrayal would be, or like stabbing someone in the back, and all he's doing is basically just driving a little faster than this guy, but like because they've set that up, how important that is. Like, you don't even need to kill somebody, even though they do a lot of that. Just like that moment is just such a big moment in this show, and it's like, it's really cool.
I also think that something else that I find really interesting about that show is that it's a very like male world, right? And like there's a lot of like kind of, I mean, the female characters I think are very strong, but there's also this element of like they make porn,
right? And
there's like a lot of ornamental women, and like there's at least one really graphic rape scene, right? With big time.
There's probably more than one. I just
can't remember. The big one was with Gemma, though.
That's the one I was thinking.
And the Aryans, right?
But there's a lot of women I know love that show, and I think that's really interesting and indicative of how
my wife loves it.
And mine does too. And like I have friends who are women who really love that show, and like ones who are like these kind of like left leaning intellectuals who you would think would not watch a show like that. Love that
fucking
show.
Into it, head over heels.
Cool. And I think that one of the things about it is that and there are racist characters on that show. There are homophobic characters on that show. There's like prison rape. There's
the fucking IRA kings, you know.
But what I think
works so well, and this I think ties into the world, is that it is an honest depiction of like that people like this really exist.
Yeah.
And if it would be easy to say like, well, we don't want to portray racism on TV because it creates a negativity or whatever, blah blah blah. Like we don't want to give those people a voice. But if you portray it in such a way that I think is honest and feels genuine, then the ugliness of it is so much a part of that world that it doesn't feel exploitative.
Well, it makes
it trashy.
Yeah.
It feels organic.
It makes it
feels necessary too.
Yeah, because like like even if you're not a biker or know anything about that world, you imagine these guys aren't sitting around talking in like PG or PC language. They're saying like a whole bunch of like awful stuff. So you got to be authentic to that world, otherwise the show's gonna suffer for it. And I think another thing you mentioned about women liking the show, like if you look at the women in the show, there are a lot of strong characters. And I think the fact that they make Gemma really strong, but also not exactly a good person, is good because it shows like women can be just as bad as men in this show. There's not really many good, like genuinely good characters in the show. Even someone like Unser, who's like more or less a good guy, does a lot of really bad shit. Like there's very few.
Well, isn't there a sheriff who comes in later?
Hale, it's Taylor Sheridan.
Yeah.
Is it him?
That guy plays the new when Unser steps down.
He wrote Sicario.
Right. So when Unser steps down as like Sheriff Charming, the new guy that's coming in is Hale, Captain Hale.
Yeah.
That's the character's name, but it's played by Taylor Sheridan. Yeah. And then he gets killed off because like you can't have a straight-laced good cop who's only going to play by the book, and like he's not going to work out.
He may be the only one I remember, because even Tara did some bad stuff. Obviously, there's like shades of like how bad people are, but like he's literally the only one I can remember.
But what about Walton Goggins' character? Is that a good character?
Hell yeah!
Do you remember the name?
She doesn't do anything. No, I don't.
I remember I can't remember the name.
But she doesn't do anything bad,
I'll look it
right?
up.
Well, I mean,
she totally does.
They drug that fat guy, and she kind of like...
They drug that fat guy!
They do, and she kind of like does stuff with him, and they blackmail him.
Oh, right, I forgot about that.
The teenager comes in, and they make the teenager think that all the hardcore biker dudes are fucking Walton Goggins, who's like a transvestite.
Yeah.
Right?
Transgender, I think.
I don't know what the...
So transvestite is like Eddie Izzard is a transvestite because he dresses like a woman, but he is a man.
This was
if you're transgender,
it was transgender. Definitely, yeah. So obviously, yes, that character compared to like Jax Teller is like a saint, right? Mm-hmm. Because like she's not going around murdering people and torturing people and running drugs and doing all this other stuff, but like even she does like some bad stuff. And it's you got to like in that world, like you said, the one straight character you have that's like straight good, like a straight and narrow, he dies pretty quick.
I think he only lasted a season, right?
Yeah,
because he got killed off in the season 3.
I think so.
Episode 1 of season 3.
I think so. He gets like run over, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
So,
what about
Wait, hold on. So Walton Goggins' character's name in Sons of Anarchy is Venus Van Dam.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
That's amazing.
Hell yeah.
There's so many funny moments in that show between that. Tig does so much stupid funny stuff.
Bobby is funny.
One of my favorite characters is Happy, who actually is like a former real like biker guy.
Yeah, he was a consultant.
He was a consultant, and they
and then they cast him in some scenes and gave him a couple lines.
Is that the older guy?
No, that's the bald guy who likes torturing people
with a really raspy voice.
Yeah.
I saw him in a CVS here.
Oh yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I mean, he probably lives
in Studio City.
He's probably gonna listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
So, one of Mike's favorite shows ever, and all their old throwback. This is from the '90s. Buffy.
It's actually probably my favorite show ever.
I've never seen Buffy.
You should see it. It sounds like
good.
I saw the movie.
The movie is awesome. I saw the movie in theaters.
I think,
and I loved it.
I remember when it came out.
It's like a show.
Huh?
Is Paul Rubens in it?
I don't know. Let's see.
I don't know. It's like a show you think you won't like, but
Buffy is really.
I mean, it's like one of the most famous shows ever, so
Yeah,
I'm sure it's.
But I mean, again, I think
your
Buffy
wife
is.
like it, or has she seen it?
I don't think so.
That'd be a good show for
So
you to watch
did
together.
Buffy? So this is a question I have for Mike, because you might know that. So all those other supernatural shows.
Like Supernatural, which is also cool.
Well, yeah, and what's Roswell? Like, did
Roswell.
all that stuff come because of the success of Buffy?
I mean, it definitely
Because that show had
help.
like a big cultural impact.
It did.
Buffy.
It definitely did, and it definitely opened the way for a lot of these supernatural type shows and things like that. And I mean, it was around 7 seasons, and then it had a spinoff with Angel for 5 seasons.
I forgot about Angel. Yeah.
Angel was around 5 seasons, and I think they carried it on in comics or graphic novels, like in canon after that. And it's really hard to say why, like, I like that show so much, but I remember this is going to date me a little bit, like, I knew when the show was on where I lived, and it was like 5 to 6 or something like that, some weird time, and I think these were reruns, and so I couldn't watch them because I wouldn't be home in time from school or from high school. So I would set up my VCR to record them.
Dang.
VCR, not DVD, VCR.
Yeah.
And then I would come home and I would rewind the tape and watch the new episodes. And this was before internet and shit, so I didn't know if they were in order or anything. Since then, I've like gone back and watched the whole series through. But it sets up a really interesting world, and it has its own rules. Like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, she's this girl who's like in a long lineage of basically slayers who kill vampires and protect the world from like, and it's not just vampires, because they have other monsters and demons and creatures and things like that. And they set up all these rules like vampires don't have souls except one, Angel. And there's like,
Well, and it's on the Hellmouth.
it's on
Right.
the Hellmouth, and the
so-
Hellmouth releases like,
But that to me is an ingenious device, because Buffy has so many episodes that are not about vampires.
yeah,
And
she's
that's
like a high school
because
kid, yeah.
the world, they set up the world so well that it you buy that like there's all this other shit going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of episodes where she doesn't even like slay any vampires. It's
Well,
all
and
about like,
the Seth Green character,
Yeah.
right?
He's a
Spoiler
werewolf.
alert, is a werewolf.
yeah, that's cool. He's
And
a werewolf.
then
There's
Willow
a,
becomes a witch. There's that.
Willow
whole-
becomes a witch. There's a vengeance demon who people can, if they've been wrong, they can like go and get vengeance on those
Well, and
people.
there's that whole weird military Frankenstein monster.
There is
season.
There's all the stuff with them putting chips into vampires, so when they try to hurt someone, they get like zapped, and it's like trying to neuter vampires basically. And so like there's a lot of really goofy, silly things, and then there's also a lot of episodes where it's like very emotional, very dramatic. And it's just a really easy show to watch because
And then she's got a younger sister, right? Michelle Trachtenberg.
Yeah, it
plays
comes
her
in
sister,
later.
Yeah,
but
Really? Harriet the Spy?
yeah,
yeah, she
But,
plays Buffy's sister.
a lot of the characters are really likable, and like
Xander.
Xander's fun.
Wasn't there like an
Buffy's
ancient
fun.
goddess too from Mesopotamia?
Probably.
Yeah, there's the
all
episode
this
that's a
stuff.
musical.
That's a really good episode. I think that episode won an Emmy or something.
And then there's
like
the one with the creepy guys who like are totally silent.
that. They're freaky.
Yeah.
Like if you talk, I think they steal your soul or something like that.
Yeah.
So it just builds up this world, and they do a good job. Like Will said, they're on the Hellmouth, so you don't need just vampires. You can put any sort of monsters.
It's
in
almost
there.
like Harry Potter, where like it's so well constructed that it gives you license to have any kind of
like they
fantastical thing.
Did, yeah,
in
they
it.
did an episode where Dracula came to town.
That's right. I forgot about that one.
And he had different rules. She staked him, but he came back, and then she staked him again, and then he finally died. There's all these different rules, but like, just the world it builds, and it, you know, people liked. I think it has a strong female character. Obviously, she's the main character, and she's stabbing it. But it's like because they set it up that she has these powers, it never feels weird to have this like 110-pound girl like killing like.
Well, something
scores
else
of
that I think
vampires.
is really interesting about Buffy too is that it breaks a lot of stereotypes in as much as Buffy is like kind of girly
Yeah, she
and like
is.
traditionally
Especially in the
feminine,
beginning.
but she's going around whooping the shit out of it.
She's a cheerleader in the beginning.
Yeah, so it's like, but I think that if you were to make that show with the wrong mentality, Buffy would be like a tomboy, or she wouldn't be someone who could embody what you might think of as contradictions, even though I wouldn't say that they are necessarily.
So definitely check it out.
So another show that I think we have to mention in terms of being like the OG of world creators, but like the ultimate OG. We don't have to talk about it because I don't think any of us are familiar with it. It's Star Trek. So I don't think we could do this show without mentioning Star Trek.
Star Trek, cool world. Know nothing about it.
It's like a juggernaut for like television history, you know. But
I just never got into it, and I'm like, you know, people are gonna flame on me for this, but I'm not a huge fan of stuff that starts with Star. That includes Star Wars, which I don't really like very much.
Or Ziggy Stardust.
Or that. So I don't like Star Trek, Star Wars too much. I do like Battlestar Galactica.
What about A Star Is Born?
I haven't seen it yet, but I imagine I won't like it.
Okay. So,
what
Star
about
Trek bears mentioning.
Spaceballs?
What about it? That doesn't have Star in it.
Could.
Star Balls?
Star Balls? No, that's a show.
It's a fucking Star Wars spoof, you idiot.
What else we got?
I got a lot of stuff on this list. A show that I really like, Orphan Black. Have you guys seen that show?
Yeah, I saw all but the last season.
And the reason I like Orphan Black is that it kind of does that Harry Potter thing of like, here's a character who thinks she's living in a normal world. Do you know the premise of it at all?
I thought it was a movie.
No, it's a show, and it's
5 seasons.
So the setup of the show is this: like the very first scene is this woman standing on a train platform, and she's kind of drunk, right? And she sees someone at the edge of the train platform, kind of like tipsy, like walking towards the edge of the platform as the train is coming in, and realizes that the person looks exactly like her. And then the person falls in front of the train and dies, and she finds the person's driver's license or something, right? And she's a cop, and they're like identical. And then it's like she finds other people who look exactly like, and it kind of goes from there. And so it starts as like this woman who thinks she lives in a normal world, like Harry Potter does, and then like the rug gets pulled out from under her, and it just gets deeper and deeper. The mythology
that sounds kind of creepy.
And there's one season of that show I didn't like.
Which one was that?
Was it the one where she's in prison for a long time?
I haven't seen the 5th season.
I like the 5th season. So the last couple I liked a lot. But there's one like in the middle I didn't really like. But
probably 3.
But there's like a lot of world stuff about like people who experiment with genetics and genetic modification of human beings.
She finds out, she's
copywriting.
Like tons of her.
Can you copyright people's genes if you make them?
Sounds kind of like another show that I really want to talk about.
Do it.
Black Mirror.
Yeah, let's talk about. I mean, we don't have to talk a lot about Orphan Black. I just really like that show.
Yeah, let's
talk about Black Mirror.
I kind of want to check it out now, though. After that,
I really like it.
She's really good.
Tatiana Maslany plays the lead character, and she plays
like 8
or 9 characters in that show.
Because they're all
it's almost
clones.
like an Eddie Murphy thing.
that are all like different versions of her.
Yeah.
No, they're all different personalities. Like there's
they have very different personalities.
There's one that's like a soccer mom. There's one that's like a computer nerd. There's one that's like an assassin. It's like a ton of them. It's really
they all have different accents. Like there's one from different. There's like a German one. There's a Russian one.
She's so good that you kind of forget that it's the same actress.
It's crazy.
Wow.
She's really
and she
good.
won an Emmy at some point,
Finally.
right? Yeah. After like years of people petitioning.
It's like they just keep giving it to like the same person. I'm like, she's playing like 8 characters. Yeah. Just give her one. Damn.
So, Black Mirror. I've seen the first season of Black Mirror. And then I saw the Bryce Dallas Howard one.
Okay, that one's really good.
Yeah, I like that one a lot.
You know, Rashida Jones wrote that.
Did she really?
Rashida Jones and Michael Schur, who's the co-creator of Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They wrote that episode.
That's cool.
So, my introduction to Black Mirror is I watched season 1, episode 1, which is the pig one.
I love that episode.
You watch that and you're like, what I love about Black Mirror is like seemingly all the episodes have nothing to do with each other. They're not the same stories, the same geographical places, the same characters, nothing, right? They all just seem to be like whacked out like little long form short films, right? Like a long sci-fi short film because they're all like 40 minutes or so. Mm-hmm. But have you seen? How far into it have you gone?
I think just like the first season.
Okay, so in season like 4 or something, there's an episode called The Black Museum. And through that museum, you see like artifacts from every single episode of Black Mirror. So like the Black Mirror universe, all the episodes are like take place in the world of Black Mirror, which you never get the hint of before. Like you see that, and it's like this episode of the Black Museum. Epic spoiler, I guess, whatever. But like this guy's giving a tour to this one person. It's like this really obscure, like in the middle of a desert, like connected to a truck stop gas station. Like there's this museum of just like weird, wacky shit. And this guy's giving a tour, and he's giving a tour of like through the Black Mirror's like cultural history, you know, like and even shit like you never saw in any episodes before, right? So it's like little mini vignettes of like Black Mirror type stories and episodes in this singular episode that ties the entire universe together, which is fucking awesome.
Cool.
But going back to
is the pig one in there?
The pilot, I guess, yeah. So I can't imagine a more like aggressive way to come out of the gate with a TV show than that pig episode.
It's so good.
Like that is.
Do you know about this episode, Mike?
That is such a.
I've been told I need to watch it.
He's the prime minister. Right?
Yeah, he's the prime.
Do you want to hear the plot? Or
Yeah,
no?
go ahead.
So the prime minister of England, his sister is abducted. What is this?
It's a member of the royal family. It's a member of the royal family.
Yeah.
It's like a niece, some obscure like Duchess of fuck off. I don't know. Like
yeah, so she gets abducted.
She gets kidnapped and then. Sorry, you can go ahead.
Well, the ransom demand is that the prime minister has to fuck a pig on live television.
Unstimulated sex.
Does
Yeah. Do you want to know?
Yeah, tell me.
Spoiler alert. Yeah.
He fucks the shit out of that pig.
Do you see it?
So good.
And dude,
It's so good.
that is like to like have that be the pilot of a TV show. You're just like and such a show with such an interesting and unique premise of like the very fleshed out Twilight Zone, right? Because it's kind of like, you know, the tone of it or whatever. Like, what's the creator's name? Charlie Booker, I think, or Booker.
I can't remember honestly.
God, the balls on that guy to like fucking write that, you know, and just say like, I'm gonna set the tone for Black Mirror with this, and it's like that. The pig episode is like has such a David Fincher type aesthetic and
That's
feel
what
to it.
I couldn't stop thinking the whole time.
Yeah, and it's just like you're like holy, like it's not. You're just hearing him give you the premise, like, oh, the prime minister of fucking one of the world leading nations, like, has to fuck a farm animal on live TV. Like, you think that's like dumbest fucking thing I ever heard. The way it plays out,
so
you're like,
good.
holy, like
Yeah.
that absolutely could happen. Like, just the way like it all ties together. And there's like, I love the premise of that show because it shows the intersection of like humanity and technology, and it like through that intersection, it brings out the darkest of both powers, right? Mm-hmm. God, I just want to like I've
so into it.
I know, dude.
This is how we were with Double Impact.
I know, right? So the pig episode of Black Mirror, I watched it and I was so like thrown off and like disturbed by it. Like I didn't know what the fuck I just watched, and I didn't know, like I had no idea at that time that like each episode was sort of autonomous and had nothing, like they weren't tied together at all. And I didn't watch episode 2. I'm like, I don't know if I want to watch this fucking show.
If they fuck a pig here, I don't know where else they're gonna go.
Like I watched it with my wife, you know, we're just watching it, like, and then the credits roll. I'm like, what the fuck? Like what? You know, like you want to know more information. Like what? You know, like you're just so flabbergasted by the thing of it. And I stepped away from Black Mirror. I was like, you know, like maybe at some point in the future I'll watch it again. And then like literally within the last 6 months, I've binged the shit out of it on Netflix. It's all on there now. And every episode is like such a awesome sci-fi premise that like it all is like you know, exists in the like in the human real world that we live in now, just a little bit in the not too distant future, you know, with future technology and shit. But it's
the episode with the device that records memories and stuff.
Oh my god, Crocodile.
That one was good.
That one, they're all good. That one fucks you up. Mm-hmm. God.
I'll check these out.
So
it's so good, dude. And it's great because it's like you don't have to. You can sit down to watch and you're like, okay, I'm gonna watch, you know, one episode, and then like it's a self-contained thing, so you don't have to be like, oh, there's a cliffhanger for episode 2, or like, oh, I need to go and rewatch that one because I forgot what happened or whatever. Like it's not. It's like watching a short film.
So we have Homeland on the list. Should we talk about Homeland?
Should we?
We can. I mean, the thing that's interesting to me about Homeland is
Is that really a world that's created?
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know. Is it?
Or is it just interpreting the world that we live in now?
Because like,
but it's interesting because that show is sold on what the world is.
Yeah.
But it's
just
our world.
Because they ripped the storylines straight from the storylines, kind of, and then obviously, you know, exaggerate parts.
So then
what I like about Homeland is I think better than any other show that's currently on the air. I think it has such a solid like finger on the pulse of like geopolitics and what's going on in the world now. Just think about like season 4, whenever Carrie, who's the Claire Danes character,
season 4 is one of the best of Homeland's one of the best seasons of TV I've ever seen.
Well, in the Germany, right? Like with
that's 5.
No,
season 4 where she's in the
Pakistan.
embassy, right?
4's in Pakistan.
She's in the embassy, right? Yeah.
But I think 5 is amazing too. The Germany one.
Well, okay, so like season 5 like sort of coincided with like these, you know, there was like attack in Marseille and like some market like trucks plowing through these crowds in Europe and stuff. And then season, what are they on? They're going into season 8, which is going to be the final. So the last of season.
I thought there was one more after this one. But
whatever the case is. So the one with like the most recent season had like the whole domestic terrorism subplot of like the Alex Jones character, you know, with like it wasn't Alex Jones, but it fucking absolutely was Alex Jones. And at the same time, when Alex Jones is like coming up into the national spotlight, going on NBC on Megyn Kelly's new NBC show, and then getting banned from the internet and all this stuff, is like they are keeping pace with what's happening. Like I don't know how that writer's room like predicts the fucking future. Like when that show's on the air, it's mimicking real life in real time, and I've never seen a show like sort of keep pace with real current geopolitics like that one does, which is fucking great.
They do a really good job.
I love that show. That's probably my favorite show that's on right now, honestly. I have House of Cards on here. Do we want to talk about? Mike hasn't seen House of Cards.
No, I haven't seen it.
Do you want to talk about House of Cards?
I mean, it's such a fucking corrupt temple, right? And now it's all tainted.
Yeah.
I mean, we can. It's just like
we don't have to. I mean, I have Entourage on here too.
I love Entourage.
I don't.
That's why I moved out to California to make movies.
Just
Yeah.
You also mentioned, which I thought was interesting. So, you know, I guess all the shows that we're talking about really are dramas or dramedies or whatever, because sitcoms typically aren't sold on the world, right? It's characters and like
they're never.
But you mentioned The Office and Parks and Rec, which I think because Parks and Rec to me might actually be an example of a world-based sitcom because it's so entrenched in what they do.
I think Parks and Rec is way more of a world thing. And actually, it's a good point. I didn't think about that because, like, the world of Pawnee, Indiana, like, you don't.
There's towns like that though in Indiana,
right? But I'm saying, like, if you look at the world of The Office, like they're in Scranton, Pennsylvania, like Scranton's like the Electric City, whatever. But like, you don't like. There's nothing uniquely Pennsylvanian about
it's all filmed
The
in
Office.
California.
Yeah, they film it up in the fucking valley, like 10 minutes from my apartment, right? I mean, you can see when they're up on the roof of the Scranton office park, you can see mountains. Like, it's the fucking Hollywood Hills, right?
Well, and like the curbs are painted red, and like it's so obvious.
Yeah, so like the world in that Dunder Mifflin Scranton branch office is what sells The Office, right? But it's like they expand so much more outside the walls of their like physical workplace in Parks and Rec, and that's what like that's why that show, you know, like there's so many like townsfolk that are like such integral parts of the thing, like the candy company and like Patton Oswalt, you know, his fucking weird ass like some of the revolutionary like reenactments and stuff, you know, and
or like the really conservative woman who doesn't like that.
With like the plastic surgery husband,
the gay husband.
Yeah, exactly.
She doesn't
like,
know he's gay. Like,
right, and then Paul Rudd being like the rich family's idiot frat boy son. You know what I mean? Like
and like John Ralphio and just all
John Ralphio.
No, it's a fun world, and it's like in what world can you like have an employee that you just like constantly rag on and he's just happy about it, Jerry?
Yeah.
Like they don't even.
And then also has like a smoking hot wife.
Yeah, they don't even call him by his right name, and he's like fine with it. It's like, but it makes sense in this world, like
or how Andy Dwyer exists.
Yeah, and, like that guy would like choke on without breathing or whatever. He'd forget to breathe and die or something like that. But
that's a good. I think that's probably.
It's a good world that is sitcom.
Yeah, I mean, like I can't think of another just straight up like broadcast sitcom that like.
I was trying to think of them
in that
like,
class.
I mean, I love Arrested Development, but that's just our world. It's just the family is eccentric, and but the world is not.
And I love that '70s show, but it's basically just the Midwest in the '70s.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, and you know, the whole sitcom means situational comedy. Yeah. Now, so is Veep a world?
I've actually never seen Veep.
I've
seen parts of Veep, but I don't think
I watched like 4 seasons. I think it's really funny. You would really like it.
I've heard nothing
it's
but
just
awesome
taking our world and like exaggerating.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's not really. Yeah. So one other thing we've all seen Ozark, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to talk a lot about Ozark, but I just wanted to mention Ozark because, especially season 1, one of the things that I really liked about that show was that it has a rural setting that is treated
as those places really are. Like, as someone who I lived in, I'm gonna have to mention another place I lived in. I went to high school in Vermont, and like rural Vermont, and not like I didn't like when I say that to people, they're like, "Oh, you went to like a prep school in Vermont?" No, like we moved to Vermont and we lived like, with these farm kids and people who like were living out in the woods and shit. And like there were kids who came to my high school who lived up a mountain where there was only one road up and down, so if it snowed they couldn't come to school. And like, but mostly when you see rural worlds on TV and in movies, it's either like Coen Brothers-esque like eccentricities, or it's like heavily romanticized, or it's the thing of like everyone's some dumbass, retarded, like racist redneck.
Yeah.
And I think Ozark does a really good job of showing what sucks about living in the middle of nowhere, but also what's appealing about it and why people love it.
Yeah.
That's again, it's not a world in the way that Game of Thrones is a world. But
it's just
I just feel like it bears mentioning because they've gone to an interesting place that you wouldn't expect a show like that to go to,
right?
And they don't treat it in a way that's nothing but condescending. Like they give agency to these people.
Yeah.
The only other thing I have written down here, which is a show that I think I'm probably the only person in the world has watched, is Sense8. Because I love the Wachowskis.
Never seen it.
I know of it, but I didn't look like a show I would want to watch.
But
it has really graphic orgy scenes, if that appeals to you.
But I can just watch porn for that.
In the interest of like, sounding competent, like we know what the fuck we're talking about, I think we do a huge disservice if we don't also mention Stranger Things and The Simpsons.
Oh, I was going to bring up Stranger Things. Yeah. I love that show.
Yeah, it's
great. Like everybody
show.
does. There's not a single person that's watched it that's like, oh, fuck these kids and fuck Netflix. You know?
I hate it. I hate it.
But one of the things that I think is interesting about Stranger Things is that I think it works on two levels. It works as a world in and of itself, and it works as our like nostalgia world
of like the 80s,
which is great.
Yeah, as like all of us grew up in the 80s.
I mean, that's like
I grew up in Indiana.
We're born in the 80s.
Yeah,
right.
I grew up in Indiana, so it's like really
Will's
cool.
Will's a touch older than the rest of the people here.
I remember when it turned 1990 at the stroke of midnight. I was 30.
I was in the USSR.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like I think that like some people dismiss Stranger Things as being like a pastiche, but I think it transcends that because even though it has a lot of references, it really is its own, I think, unique thing.
Yeah, they create their own world, and it takes,
It's almost like Movie World 1980s.
It's it's paying homage to a lot of Spielberg stuff, and which is fine, but it's
I also saw a lot of
gear.
Guillermo del Toro influence.
I'm sure there was
in there, even to the point where there's like a shot that's verbatim in Hellboy, like the exact same shot.
Yeah.
But I mean, we can talk about Stranger Things. That's another Harry Potter-esque thing, right? Where it's like you have the normal world, and then we start to discover the other world.
Yeah,
and the characters are really good. And what did you guys think about season 2 of Stranger Things?
I liked it. Introduced new characters, and it gave like the teenagers a little bit more to do.
Yeah. I disliked how I think it's the kid in season 1 who has the teeth problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What's his name in the show?
I know his.
We're supposed to be a bunch of fucking experts. We can't remember.
I know his real name. The actor's name.
Is Gus, right?
Gatton.
Or Gatton. Yeah,
Gaten,
that's right.
yeah.
Jaden.
Yeah.
Whatever. So he was so obviously a fan favorite from season 1, right? Because Netflix dumps everything at the same time, and everyone just binges it because that's what we do in 2018, 2017.
2018.
And like he was such a he stood out as like everyone talked about him more in season 1, and they like because of that I think the showrunners, the Duffer Brothers, like gave him too many solo subplots and storylines just to like satisfy the thirst of like the global audience that loved this fucking kid. It's like
that kind of happened with I forget his name too. The
Steve,
the John Ralphio kid.
I like Steve.
I like Steve too, but like. He went from just being like this douchey boyfriend ex to like this like fan favorite defender of the kids and like he's like their babysitter and he's like a saint because he's like, look, I know we had this thing but you don't like me. It's all right, you go with this guy. I'm just gonna go hang out with these like 10-year-olds.
I really like the redheaded girl, the new character with like the weird brother.
Yeah.
The one thing I didn't like is that it took so long to bring 11 back into the fold with the rest of them. And the one,
but that scene where she shows up, that's cool.
There is one episode of that show that I really hated, and it's that whole thing where she goes off on her own, and I'm like, I hated that.
Oh man, that was like such a dumbass filler episode.
But I will say that I didn't. I'm not gonna say that's like my favorite episode ever, but I like that. I think that's an interesting storyline for that character.
I'm not. I don't disagree with you. I just think like that was
a whole episode for that.
I liked it when she goes super dark, and I wanted her to go darker.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the way in which she should be doing that, but I like that idea of like taking her to like a really dark place, and her like almost like the dark side in Star Wars, where her powers become for their own sake, and she becomes this like wrathful being who's like, "Fuck you, the world screwed me over. I'm just gonna go ham on you bastards." I love badass wrathful revenge.
That would be fun for like a short amount of time, but then it makes the other characters like obsolete. Like she wouldn't need anybody else, right? If she could just do all this shit, which is one thing I like the way they do kind of limit her powers a little bit. Like she starts bleeding and stuff.
Yeah.
If there was no limit to her, she wouldn't need, the sheriff's name, and she wouldn't need the other kids. She wouldn't need anybody's help. And the fact that she does makes it like their relationship important. Right. And one show I'll mention that you guys probably haven't watched is The Expanse, because it's like a completely like huge world that they set up.
And that did that just go to Amazon?
That just got resurrected by Amazon for season 4 coming up, and it is based on. It has a lot of similarities to Game of Thrones in the sense that it is based on a series of books. It does introduce these like elements warring with each other, and it's like a very big scale, and it has a very high production value, which is one of the reasons I think Amazon bought it, is because they think it's Game of Thrones, because it is a very highbrow sci-fi. It's probably my favorite sci-fi show that's been on in the past 10 to 20 years.
Since Buffy?
Yeah, and to me, it's not Game of Thrones, but it's right below it, because the world it creates is so big, because it is sci-fi and it is in space, and there's like so much going on that it's a really interesting world, because there's Earth, there's Mars, there's people on the belt, and they all talk differently, they all look differently. It's really cool. The people on the belt grew up in the asteroid belt, and so the way gravity and all that shit works, it makes their like bones and stuff different. So like you'll see these like 8-foot tall characters walk around, but they really have fragile bones and stuff like that. And I think I read the show has a lot of consultants from NASA, so a lot of like the way they act in space is like really authentic. They have like space boots that like
what platform is it on?
It was on Sci-Fi for the first 3 seasons, which is really weird because you wouldn't expect a really good show to be on there.
Because they don't usually put a ton of money into stuff, right?
But it had good ratings and it had a really high budget. But I think what ultimately made them cancel is because I think it was just too expensive.
Yeah,
like, and you could see it growing too as the seasons go on. Season 1 was good, but you could see where they could save some money, and then it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And like Thomas Jane's in season 1 and 2.
Interesting.
And season 3, which is the latest season they had, like you can tell that this show was really, really expensive. And I just don't think Sci-Fi, being a smaller channel, could justify the cost. And luckily, Amazon could. And it's like a show that a lot of like nerdier celebrities like Patton Oswalt is a huge fan, and apparently Jeff Bezos is a huge fan. So
well, I mean, like
something to do with it.
So for that logistics, like Sci-Fi is I don't know the specifics, but they're folded into like some other umbrella, and they're owned by one of the major studios. They have to be. I also think they're going away from like original series. Right, but like, so the reason it got sold to, or the reason it would have gotten canceled from Sci-Fi is not because it was too expensive. It's just they're not recouping enough money from advertising dollars because not enough people watch fucking Sci-Fi channel.
Yeah, that has a lot to do with it.
Right,
too.
so it's
but
they wanted to like they need to get it on a bigger platform so more people watch it.
Yeah,
essentially.
But in terms of worlds it creates, it's really interesting, and because just space in this world. Humans can travel throughout the galaxy, so they can go to like Mars, they can go mine for rocks on like a distant moon, they can like crash into Venus. It's really cool. And I think anyone who likes big worlds with like huge ensemble casts like Game of Thrones would really like the show.
Jim mentioned something that we would be remiss not to talk about just a little bit, which is The Simpsons.
Yeah, I mean, any show that can go on for 30 years.
Over 30 years. It's insane.
Has a world that exists.
That world is so unique.
Yeah, it has a big enough world, like you just said, that is unique enough that the characters can live and play in for 3 fucking decades. And I actually went to, I got the privilege to go to a Simpsons table read recently that's going to, for an episode that's going to be out next fall, like fall 2019. And it was so surreal seeing like these humans sitting around a conference room table, and they're like the words and the voices that I've known for the last 25 years of my life, like coming out of them, but you know, not seeing Homer Simpson and Marge, Bart and Lisa, like
that would probably
walking and talking. It was like the most bizarre, surreal, but like awesome experience ever. It's like you're seeing, you know, Dan Castanella or whatever his last name is that voices Homer. He was just sitting there, like sort of like leaning on the table, like with his half his face just resting in his hand, just talking like Homer, you know, just as if he was just like reading to himself, you know. It was like the fucking coolest thing ever. And all those, like, you know, it's been the same voice actors for the family, like for you know, since episode 1. It's just
it's like a show. I'm like, I used to watch that for years, all the time. That was like 20 years ago. I'm like,
I know, right?
So much.
Yeah.
I think I recently looked to see how many episodes there was, and it's like in 600 or 700, it's some insane number like that. And then like the animated shows like stick around for a long time, like South Park's in the 20s, and
Family Guy's up there.
Family Guy's
Futurama
like
had like 300 episodes.
Yeah, so like
Did it really?
So it's got over 200.
a lot. And they all have fun, interesting worlds that they set up. Futurama's actually a really fun, interesting world that they set up too, and it's like most of the same people that did The Simpsons.
And they got a new their Disenchantment on Netflix now is The Simpsons creators, and it just got picked up for season 2.
And I actually watched the whole thing because it's really easy to watch because it's like 25-minute episodes and they're all there. And it's really fun. It's like this. It's another really interesting world. It's kind of like a medieval fantasy. That is mostly grounded in reality, although it's a little exaggerated. But they're not like all monsters and stuff. There's like some, but
right.
And he's an elf. But so like, but and that I guess that brings a good question to me is like, is it easier to set up like a world like that in animated than it is in live? And obviously, I think it is, right? Because anything you can kind of imagine, you can do. A lot easier,
I mean, it
right?
gives you a lot more freedom.
Yeah.
Right? And I also think that tonally, animation gives you a lot more leeway because you don't have to worry, like, is this too absurd to do? Because it's like, well, it's a cartoon.
Right.
So.
But then, but then do you think, like, when you watch it, do you look at it as, like, this is a really interesting world, or just because you're used to it, do you not care? Like say, BoJack Horseman, he's a horse, but, like, does anyone, like, it doesn't really matter, right? Everyone treats it like he's just a guy.
I'm just laughing at that sentence. Take BoJack Horseman. He's a horse. Fucking disclaimer in case anyone didn't know that already.
No, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. BoJack Horseman's a horse.
God
but
damn.
like, why is he a horse? And like, that's what I'm talking about.
Why is he a horse?
Why is he a horse?
We need to walk out of here just like you talking to the microphone by yourself.
That'd be the greatest podcast ever. It'd be like 8 hours of gibberish and like 2 hours of eating sounds.
People would just listen to it on the flight from New York to Shanghai.
Hell yeah.
Non-stop.
So there you go. That's our little discussion of TV worlds, the ones that we like the most. Maybe we'll do this again sometime if we see some more TV shows.
So much good stuff.
We'll broaden the horizons.
Maybe we'll all watch ones that we haven't watched and we can come back and talk about them. Yeah,
there's probably a 0% chance of us doing that.
We can pretend that we did it. Yeah. Thanks for listening. This has been The Danger Zone, the Terrible Infant Movies and TV podcast, and we will be back.
Bye.
Bye.